This is Timothy Lotus here with History 901 doctoral research video about the historiography regarding my dissertation subject. And I'm here at an abandoned road in the middle of Long Island, New York, to add some historical atmosphere. Because this road, abandoned, encroached by vegetation everywhere, used to be a very busy road from the 1930s well into towards the end of the 20th century, where there was a gigantic psychiatric hospital here, located both sides of this road. There's different side roads that are abandoned too, and railroad tracks. Today there's just a little remnant of this psychiatric hospital, but at its height in the 50s had about over 30,000 patients. They demolished some of the bigger buildings. A very small part is still in use today. Other parts are part of a community college, and this park here. This is a preserve, actually. But I'm here I am, to talk about my doctoral research regarding whether 1931 is a more accurate reflection of public sentiment of when the Great Depression started, at least people that lived at that time, rather than 1929, which has become the consensus point where everyone says started the Great Depression. Pretty much all histories, very few don't start it at that point, but I argue that it's not accurate because conditions really weren't that bad until the European financial crisis, which started in Austria in the spring of 1931, gradually spread through all of Europe until it became a total banking crisis all over the world by September. And that's when it struck here. And that's when you started seeing massive bank closures. I have lots of evidence for this, that in 1930, there actually wasn't that many bank closures most of the year. They were actually, for most of 1930, at the end there was a panic in the South, which skewed the statistics. But most of 1930, bank closures were actually lower than they were in the 20s on average. And it appeared as everything was okay. Unemployment wasn't really a problem. But in 1931, everything came crashing down. And I'm gathering social evidence to back the thesis that the American people really didn't think anything abnormal was happening to the American economy. Like, they knew there was a recession. There was some hype about the stock market crash, but not many people had stocks. So it really didn't affect them. It was more just like a sensational news story. It was popular to talk about, but it really they didn't see it as a calamity as it was seen later until 1931, when there was a worldwide panic. And by the end of the year, things were terrible, much more terrible than they were at the beginning of the year, 1931. This empty area here is where one of the giant buildings, one of the bigger ones, used to be. It was torn down, or blown up, I should say, in 1989 because it was structurally unsound, and it was been vandalized over many times. So just a little interesting side note. Here's a more typical Long Island scene. This is the north shore of Long Island, looking into the Long Island Sound. And it's a little hazy today, but Connecticut is on the other side. If you can, you can sort of see the outline there. But anyway, I came here to talk about the historiography. And I do apologize for that. The earlier scene where it was a little off center, I noticed that I'm not used to facing the phone the other way when I film stuff for my YouTube videos. So, but anyway, I was talking about the historiography, and in the beginning, the first accounts of the Great Depression explaining it, they don't connect the stock crash with the terrible unemployment situation right away, because it didn't happen right away. Even books like Frederick Allen's books that were one was written in 1931, one in 1940, and then you have Theodore Jocelyn, who was secretary to Herbert Hoover, who wrote a book, and they kind of say there was two depressions. There was the first recession after the stock crash, which we largely recovered from, and then there was the European crisis. 1931, things got worse. Actually, Frederick Allen's first book, he doesn't even mention it. He treats the recession as a sort of cathartic event. America needed it because we were getting a little crazy with speculation, and now we're back to normal, knowing that this country needed it to get sane again. But anyway, from there, because the stock crash was so sensational, they continued to connect the events in the 60s and 70s. McIlvaine had a famous book, pretty much starts the Depression after 1929. A lot of them do. You start to see some breaking of that a little with histories that are more specific about the early 30s, like Ben Bernanke's histories. He was an expert on the financial aspects of the Great Depression, and he cites very well that things recovered a lot after the stock crash, and really the Great Depression started in 1931 and not so much 1929. He doesn't say that directly, but he gives evidence showing that the economy was recovering up until 1931. And you see also that in more recent books like Amity Shlaes, I don't know if I say her name right, but she wrote a famous revision of the account, and she actually blames more the Smoot-Hawley tariff, which was passed in June 1930, but there was a lag effect. It really didn't start affecting the economy till the next year, and with the banking crisis, I think was just a double whammy, and everyone else started raising their tariffs because of that, and that hurt also. And actually, McIlvaine, who I mentioned before, who wrote one of the more famous accounts, he actually did a second edition where he wrote a long introduction all about how Amity Shlaes's book is inaccurate, and he didn't like it very much. So yeah, he had to put out a second edition and wrote that, which was interesting. And now it's kind of up in the air. A lot of the Depression era books, they don't have to do about they kind of skip over the European banking crisis, but it was a major crisis. The whole summer, that was all that was international news was about. How these nations were trying to come up with something to save the Central European banks that were all going under. And the big moment came when Britain wound up leaving the gold standard, and that's when people knew this was really bad. And that's when the banks started collapsing here. And it's really an interesting story when you go through the whole lot of it. Before I go, here's another view of the nice shoreline here. And I thank you for watching. As you can probably see from my channel, I have other videos I do about interesting things that happened in the 1930s. And if you're interested, you can feel free to watch those. They're mostly local stories, things that happen here on Long Island. But I thank you. I wish everyone best of luck on their dissertations.